Hello and welcome back. So as the title indicates here today, we're going to take another look at the Last Judgment. Yeah, let's take a look at a big, scary, misunderstood idea and recast it, shall we? Let's reimagine it in the thought system of A Course in Miracles with this as our guide. We're in chapter 2, section 8 of the text, which is the last section of chapter 2, and it's the meaning of the Last Judgment. So let's go through what Jesus will have us consider to be the Last Judgment and recast it and reimagine it. Now, you may have been raised with the Last Judgment as a very scary and threatening idea, as in God's going to swoop down from the skies and judge all of us, harshly, of course, based on what we did here in this world. And if we didn't do certain things, then we'd be cast into a fiery lake to boil and bubble forever. Oh, and people that didn't go to our building, yeah, well, that's where they'll be. That's where you can find them. You may have been raised in this tradition, and the interesting thing about A Course in Miracles is that it finds you. So you're here for a reason, whether you're brand new to this material or whether this has been the foundational centerpiece of your spiritual practice for a long, long time, and everything in between, right? This material finds you, and our background is our background. Now, you may have been raised with the idea of the Last Judgment as punishment, as scary, and eternal damnation. That was certainly the way that I was raised in not one but two fundamentalist Christian traditions in the United States. So a number of you are from the West with a Western background, and whether your parents or whether you were a practicing Christian or Jew or anything like that, right? Whether that was the case for you or not, still it's the overarching cultural environment in the West, isn't it? So we're all familiar with the notion of the Last Judgment. It's misunderstood, quite simply. So if you're like me and you were one of those kids in Sunday school that said, wait a minute, teacher, why would God condemn 80% of the planet or more to a fiery hell because they don't go to our building at 11 o'clock on a Sunday? Why? And not surprisingly, I never got a satisfactory answer to that. So let's reimagine it the way Jesus would like us to see it. Let's take this uplifting passage in the text of A Course in Miracles and reimagine the Last Judgment. We start with the idea that we did not create ourselves. God is the creator. We didn't create ourselves. Our parents did not create us. We did not create ourselves. Let's start with that. So, of course, already the ego is on the run, and it may be trying to convince you that this is wrong. If that's the case, well, welcome to the path. It's good to have you here. That's happened to every single one of us, by the way. We did not create ourselves. And what this course refers to as our miscreations, all our illusions and our psychodrama here in the world, may be real to us because we've invested our belief in them. So they appear real to us, but they're not real in the mind of God. Which means they're not real. Just because we're running around suffering does not mean that God is also running around suffering and playing favorites and defining and defending personal territory and condemning 80% of the world to a fiery hell because they don't go to a certain building on Sunday at 11, and if you're a really nice person, Wednesdays at 7:30 p.m. I mean, if you want to curry extra favor. I know that is a familiar refrain for a number of you. And the funny thing is we can sit back and laugh now, can't we? Decades later as adults on the spiritual path. Yeah. But we didn't create ourselves. And so the last judgment appears to be threatening. Well, here's something. God doesn't judge. Mm-hmm. Now, if you were raised, as I was, in fundamentalist traditions, that's not what we were taught. But it's what I've always known. This is a confirmation, and maybe this serves as a confirmation for you that if you were that kid, like I was in Sunday school, thinking, wait a minute, that can't be. Why would perfect love judge? It can't. Not only would it not, it cannot, and it doesn't, and never has, and never will. Perfect love does not judge. This is not an attribute of God, it is judgment. That would imply that there is something or someone out there to judge. Remember, this is pure non-duality. Only God is. There's no judgment to be made. God doesn't judge. And the last judgment, as we're typically raised to think of it like an instantaneous thing. Well, in fact, as Jesus points out, it can take place over what appears to be a long period of time. The miracle shortens that time. And here's something in paragraph 2 that's very uplifting for all of us, that if enough of us develop miracle-minded thinking, then that time frame is shortened, collectively shortened, which is very, very cool. Think of the implications of that. That's really cool. The Last Judgment, as it's reinterpreted here, is not undertaken by God, but by all of us as Jesus's brother, with his help, naturally. But it's undertaken by us. It's not undertaken by God, who does not judge. So what is this? It's a final healing. It's a final healing. That's what the Last Judgment is. And this is what we're invited to see it as. It's not a punishment. It's not being cast into a lake of fire. What happens here is we come through our own practice of forgiveness to understand what's worthy and what's not. So what's not worthy are miscreation, are separation ideas. What's worthy are loving thoughts. And we come to discern the difference between the two. And when we no longer invest our miscreations with our belief, when we no longer believe in them, they disappear. They simply vanish. They're never there. They've not been there. They're not there now. We withdraw our belief in them. They're gone. It is the turning on a light in a dark room. The darkness simply vanishes. It is as though it were never there because it was not there and is not now. It's the sorting out of the false, our miscreations, from the true, our loving thoughts. We're told here in this course that it's our loving thoughts that are really the only things that can be said to be real here in the world. That's really the only thing, our loving thoughts. Forgiveness is, of course, an illusion in itself, yet it's the illusion that leads us out of hell. It leads to the peace of God. It leads us away from error rather than back into it. Our miscreations, our separation, our individual identity thoughts, our judgment, our blame, our lashing out in hatred, that's our miscreation. It's not worthy of the Son of God. And the Last Judgment is our parsing this out and citing for our real identity as one with God, having never left our source. Why? Because ideas leave not their source. So really, the Last Judgment is, as Jesus puts it, a doorway to life. It has nothing to do with death and damnation. It's a doorway to life. It's our discerning what is worthy and what is not. The more of us do this, the shorter time is. The miracle shortens time. How? When we learn a forgiveness lesson, we no longer have to repeat it. Time, which doesn't exist in the first place, appears to be condensed and condensed and condensed. Shorter and shorter until boom, we're home, where we've always been. Some interesting points here in paragraph 5 that I want to point out. No one who lives in fear is really alive. Interesting, isn't it? And that's so true when you think about it. Nobody who is running around in a fear-based state, whatever that may look like on the outside, whether it's depression or anxiety or blame, or whether they run for political office and dig themselves a giant karmic hole, giant, no matter who they may claim to represent. Yeah, no matter what the outward manifestation of fear looks like, nobody who lives in fear can truly be said to be alive. Time appears to exist for us to make this last judgment of what's worthy and what's not. So it's a doorway to life. It's not the pronouncement of death and punishment for supposed sins. It's not what it is. It's not what it is at all. And it's our own perfect judgment of our own perfect creations. How about that? It's completely different than a number of us have been raised to think it is. All right, so before we wrap up, let's say a couple of words about the ego being fundamentally threatened here. This course invites us to rethink everything we've been taught. Now, you don't have to have been raised in the Judeo-Christian background. A number of us are, and this course was dictated in the 1960s and 1970s to a woman in New York City, so Western background there. Yet the ideas here, the ego being one of them, is familiar to any student of Buddhism, Hinduism, or Eastern philosophy. In fact, there's as much East here as there is West, maybe more, in fact. This is universal, so whatever your background, the last judgment is not made by God, who doesn't judge at all. Your ego may really, really be talking to you right now. And these ideas can be threatening. There is no world. You're not a body. Yes, the verbal math means we're actually not human beings as we identify ourselves. It's not who we are, and we know that. Yet the ego is terrified of that, doesn't want you to believe it. Therefore, expect plenty of resistance if you do this course. The aim of this course is to change our perception 180 degrees. We've been wrong about ourselves, so let's cultivate right-mindedness. The ego may respond in many different ways, saying, yeah, no, this is wrong. This can't be. This is threatening. You'll know. And each and every one of us that has studied this course has experienced this because it's part of the path for almost all of us, is to experience that resistance. So well, there are many things that you can practically do when you notice and experience that resistance. Forgive it. Forgive the ego. We're forgiving the images that appear on the screen of life. That's one of them. Yeah, forgive that. It's not a real thing. It's simply a mistake. That's all. And what's really important here, and this is why this course repeats ideas, it's why any spiritual tradition repeats ideas, is because we find in our daily lives and in practice that we need to revisit these ideas over and over again. That's why these videos are dropped 5 or 6 times a week. Really, it is. That's why we repeat ideas. So the conventional modern attitude of, that's so last year, or that's old, I've seen that already. That conventional modern attitude doesn't really work on the spiritual path because we actually need that repetition. We need to see things in 100 different ways. Same idea, 100 different ways. The 101st time maybe that we pay attention to it might be when we actually get it and begin to put it into practice. So let's all just take a few moments and really contemplate what Jesus is telling us here. The last judgment is a doorway to life. It is not punishment. I hope that makes you really, really happy, and that this may come as a relief. So I'd love to have you join me here. Here's the subscription button. That's right over here. It's the red arrow. And I'd love to have you join me here. These videos are 15 to 20 minutes, and in the coming year, 2023, I'm going to begin offering a longer live stream, which will permit some deeper discussion. Up to an hour is the length of the live stream that I'm thinking of. And along with the possibility of live interaction, it's an opportunity to go deeper with these teachings, and it's designed to actually complement these shorter videos, which I'll continue to offer here on YouTube. So stay tuned for details on those longer offerings of a live stream. And I really, really hope that you have a beautiful new year. It's December 31st here in North America as I record this. Thank you, as always, for joining me, but especially thank you for your commitment and dedication to your spiritual practice, which is the highest form of offering that you can make to anyone, anywhere, anytime. So for that, I thank you. All right. Thank you all for joining me.